Hey everyone, welcome to Balanced Bodybuilding Radio. My name is Leemarie and I am a Glam Girl Bikini coach and an NPC bikini competitor. And I am here with my coach and my co-host.
Hey guys, it's Amy Enger, founder and CEO of Glam Girl Bikini.
And today we are going to talk about fitness trackers and accuracy and pros and cons. And we're going to dive into your heart rate availability and your heart rate variability and how that affects stress, how that affects fat loss, your goals having to do with being in the improvement season, if you're a bikini competitor, or if you're lifestyle and you are just trying to be healthier, lose some weight. Stress can have a big impact on that. So that's what we're diving in today. But first, sort of random question. This week, I want to know an update on how you are doing with our Glam and Grit challenge. So we are about 12 days, 13 days into the
13
challenge.
days. It's
And
easy to track because it started on June 1st.
yeah, it's perfect.
It's whatever day of the week it is, that's what day you're on.
Day 13. So
Yeah.
I want to know just how has that changed anything with you and your routine? What have you enjoyed about it and what has been like the hardest thing to do?
Yeah, I would say actually getting outside to exercise has been the challenging part. I'm noticing that I don't, for whatever reason, even though it's really nice out and it's like sometimes rainy and sometimes a little bit hot, like that's been a little bit more of a challenge than I thought it would be. Because I do regularly walk my dog, but yeah, the weather hasn't been cooperating recently this last week. So I would say that's the most challenging part. I really like the 10 pages of book reading because that really takes me away from like screen time and it really helps me wind down before bed. So I like that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think both of those things are the biggest maybe inconveniences. You have to like make a special effort to get outside for a whole 30 minutes.
Mhm.
I think actually with both of those things, I've mostly been noticing it with getting outside, what being outside does for your mental health. And
Yeah.
I just think that is so underrated. Just getting out into the sunshine, looking around. So taking your eyes off the screen, looking around, looking at trees, breathing deeply, getting the sun on your face. It does so much for your mood and just your mental health. It's so beneficial. And then I have been kind of self-challenging myself. Like I added this in that I've been trying to 000 out my macros every day. And so hitting my protein to 0, so exactly on that exact amount, and then carbs and fats, hitting them all on 0. That's not part of the challenge, but the challenge does have guidelines of you have to hit within 3 to 5 grams of protein and carbs, 1 to 3 grams of fat. And I know that I have been lazy about that in the past, whereas I've been the one to hit my protein or even go over on protein and then I'll hit my calories, but I don't always hit fats and carbs exactly. And I think that's like a tendency of mine to like overshoot the good macro and under eat on like carbs and fats. But I've seen some great progress with just zeroing out all the macros on point. And that's been
Yeah.
really encouraging for me.
Yeah. I've been following within the rules, but I don't always hit the 000. Whenever I do feel like I'm hitting the lottery. So I always put like my jackpot. Like
Yeah. It's tough sometimes. It's
it's
really tough.
hard. It's very
Yeah.
hard Tetris. You have to really plan it out. You can't just fly by the seat of your pants and just
Right.
like have
Yeah.
some food prepped and think, okay, well, this will work. No, you
Yeah.
have to do it way in advance and tinker with every last little macronutrient.
But
So,
even having those guidelines of between 3 to 5 grams of carbs and fats, and then 1 to 3 grams, or carbs and protein, 1 to 3 grams
mhm,
of fat, that's a pretty tight budget as well. And it takes some
mhm,
figuring out. But I've learned that using whole food sources, it's so much easier to manipulate that than doing something like a protein bar or something, because that's like several ingredients. It's carbs, fat, and protein in one. It's really hard to manipulate that. But if I do something like egg whites and, fruit and peanut butter, it's so easy to manipulate amounts to hit, your numbers. So pro tip.
mhm. Yeah, somebody was asking me about that. Like, how do I get better at doing 000? And they finally hit it like this weekend. And I'm like, man, it's just really about preparation and tinkering. You just have to keep like messing around with numbers until it finally fits that perfect puzzle.
And then
So,
something I also just discovered, which you maybe know that, but if you're really busy, like I have a few clients that work in the medical industry and they just like they're so busy, they have to be prepped at the beginning of the week. You can actually, if you hit that perfect day, you can copy that day and paste
oh
it
yeah,
for other days.
definitely.
I just found that
Yeah.
out. It's so
Oh, no,
convenient.
I totally do that all the time. That's usually when I hit the 000 is like once I find that perfect magic formula, I just eat the same
Just
thing
repeat.
like the
Because I
rest of
can
the
do
week,
that. I
put
love
it on repeat.
repeating foods for like 3 or 4 days. Like I can do that. And I love you don't have to think
Mhm.
about it. I love the foods I eat. And then, the next week or halfway through the week, I'll switch them up kind of thing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As long as you
Yeah, it doesn't bother me at all. Like my challenge is when I have a high carb day. That's
oh
where I
yeah.
have a really hard time because a lot of my carbs have protein in them. And yeah, it just makes it hard math.
Yep, yep. Figured
But
it out.
anyways,
Okay.
so yeah, we're gonna get into this device podcast. So what should we do? You want to talk about the definition of HRV first? Do you want me to kind of define that for the
Yeah,
listeners?
definitely. So I
Okay.
am aware of, the idea of, heart rate variability, fight or flight, rest and, repair. But yeah, why don't you go ahead and just define it for our listeners and kind of tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so I have to say, like, we had a mind-blowing conversation before we hopped on. Leemarie did not realize that her Apple Watch has been tracking her HRV, so her mind was blown. If you are one of those people that have an Apple Watch, which a lot of people do, I just encourage you to go into your health app. It's that little heart on your iPhone, and when you go in there, click on heart rate variability and just hit show all data, and it will tell you your it'll track it multiple times throughout the day. Some it only gathers information once. You have to be kind of still for it to register. And mine usually always registers as soon as I put it on in the morning. And sometimes that's the only recording I get. But if there's multiple times during the day, like if you're sitting driving a car or like I don't know, like if I'm at night, like foam rolling or something, it'll capture multiple ones. So basically, so you're like if you think about a like a metronome and kind of like how your heart is, it doesn't beat regularly like a metronome. It actually changes rhythms with each beat. And so this constant variation in milliseconds between your heartbeats, it's known as your heart rate variability. So there's some situations that it does result in an increased like a high HRV, which it seems like that would be a bad thing when we think about cardiac stuff. Like if we have a high pulse or we have a high blood pressure, that's a bad thing. Well, in the HRV world, that's actually a really good thing. So when I look at my numbers and I hit like 100, that is like really good day. I've had really good job with stress management, recovery, really quality sleep. So it's really hard for me to hit 100. Usually I only get there like after I put my watch on after a massage when I'm like really super chill.
Mhm.
So that and then while others cause the intervals and the beats to stay more consistent, so that's like a low HRV. So just those balances and like responses to stressors. So for example, your like if you're really really stressed out and your beats are really fast, then you don't have those gaps in between, so that makes a really low HRV. So if I'm in the teens, I know for me like that's I'm really really stressed out. So for everybody it's different. So it's not like you can look at my numbers and be like, oh well, that's what mine should be, like 100, or they shouldn't be 19 or whatever it is. You kind of have to look at yourself as an individual because each person is unique. So you have to look at the trends over time and kind of see like what's my average HRV. I've heard that they they say that a good HRV, like in quotes, is basically like close to your age. So for me, like 43 would be like a good number for you, like mid 30s. But it's all dependent on the person, because there's different factors like demographics, hormone cycles and things like that that you can't control, that dictate your HRV. So your rest and digest tells your heart to slow down. So it's making room for variability with the beats. So that equals higher HRV. And then your fight or flight system tells your heart to speed up. And then that just limits the space for that variability to take place. So other factors that might control it being like a lower HRV are emotion, stress, illness. So if you're sick, it's surprising, like even if you don't feel stressed out, that's actually a stress on your body. Other things like that you can control are like your sleep routine, your nutrition. You'll notice like if you drink alcohol the next day, you'll have a really low HRV. Caffeine does that as well. Any kinds of like medication or your hydration levels, and then physical fitness, they could all impact that. Like Sunday, I had done yoga. And so I think I remember looking at my HRV and it was super low, or sorry, super high during that yoga session. So it had like climbed up. So whenever you're focusing on like recovery and those aspects, it really does make a difference and improves it a lot.
Mhm.
Did you have
Yeah,
anything to add to that?
I do. I actually have like a little personal story about this, and I wish
Yeah.
that I had the data, but as we were talking about this before we got on the podcast, it was really kind of blowing my mind that you can track this and how closely related it is to stress. Because last year, so in 2022, I was in a very stressful position at my job, and I love my job. I loved it, but it was very high stress. And looking back, I can kind of see the effects of that on my body. And I wish I had the data, but the problem is I got a new phone at the beginning of this year, so I can't look at the data. But what you were saying, Amy, was I bet if you looked at your HRV score, it would be very low all year. And I remember I actually prepped for 4 shows. I only did 3. I actually pulled out of the first show because I didn't feel like my body was responding. And I'm very disciplined. I was following everything to a T, and my body would
Mhm.
just not drop the fat. I remember you had put me on the circuits of death even, and we were doing circuit training and everything I could to get lean, and I just couldn't do it. And I stuck with it, and I was able to compete 3 times last year. But I mean, I was doing sprints on top of my cardio, on top of my steps, on top of everything to do this. And then my hormones were pretty much messed up all year, which I didn't even really, I kind of just chalked it up to prep. But then as soon as I was out of this high stress situation, which again, it was something that I loved, it was just a very high stress job. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be in some really bad situation. It could be that you really enjoy what you do, but it's a high stress environment. And I don't even think I was aware of how stressful it was, but it really affected me. And once I got out of that, I think it even took me a few months for my body to recover. And that directly affected my ability to maintain what I feel confident in as far as like a body weight. And again, it was very frustrating because I felt like I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing all my cardio, getting my workouts in, eating my macros, drinking my water, and my body wasn't responding like I felt like it should be responding. And I really think that was directly related to my stress and trying to bring that down. So if you have any comments on that, or let's
Yeah, I mean, I think so. If you don't mind me sharing this, but like
yes,
a huge vital sign for women is having their cycle, and you had lost your cycle while you were in that job. And then, like,
whole year.
basically, when you had put in your resignation, you started your cycle back up. Like,
Yeah.
I
The
mean,
day
and you've had it
after.
like literally every month
Yeah.
consistently.
Yep.
And the aftermath of that job, I think just we had to like pull back on your training to take steps forward.
Mhm.
So I know you didn't like, I mean, it's hard to do that as an athlete. Like you feel like, okay, I just need to push a little bit harder, eat a little bit less, and exercise a little bit more. But really, like when we started feeding you more, like pulling off your training, pulling back on cardio, that was when you started to actually change. And we started seeing some good things, like with, addressing like your adrenals, because they had been pretty taxed from all that cortisol dumping. So
Yeah.
we digress a little bit with the watches and like trackers and everything, but these are good things to keep in mind because life experiences really will impact. And that's one of my favorite parts about wearing a watch, is actually because this is the first, I kind of nerd out when it comes to HRV because I'm a data person, and this is an actual data point that you can actually look at your stress in a physical number. And before HRV came about, there wasn't really a way to measure that. And I'm one of those people that I have a high tolerance for stress perception. So I can be under a lot of stress and I won't really notice it in the moment because I'm just kind of like you were saying, like you kind of just fight through it. Like you've like faced adversity, like you're up for a challenge. And I think a lot of competitors are like that. They have that sort of mentality, like, okay, I just need to push through this. But then you look back at the numbers and like, and a life event that happened, like, and you can look and you see the numbers are so low on your HRV, and it's very telling. Some other things that you can do to just kind of increase that score, or you can see like, okay, I did a good job, having a rest day, or making sure my bedroom was the right temperature when I was sleeping. Um, I went on a hike in nature. I did yoga. Some other things, like you could have an acute stress situation or like a hot bedroom where you're not getting good, like restful sleep and things like that. Um, a late meal can increase or decrease your HRV, and then just like several variables, but it's just interesting to look at if you have the data. So we wanted to talk about different devices, and I think that there's a lot of different devices that do great things. I personally have just chosen Apple Watch because I have an iPhone. It's very friendly with that. I'm not an Android user. I know people that are Android users tend to prefer like a Fitbit or a Garmin. I have a bunch of clients that actually prefer the Aura ring because it fits like a ring on your finger. You can sleep with it. It doesn't need charged as frequently. I think that's like the biggest downfall to Apple, is that it loses its battery really quickly. And I don't get any of my data while I'm sleeping. Whereas the Aura Ring, the Whoop does a really good job of that. They have a replaceable battery. So while one battery is charging, like you have another one on. So you can sleep with it. Those both do a great job of recording like your quality of sleep and then your recovery. I think Whoop even like gives you a color, like
Mhm.
green is good to go, like you're fully recovered. Red means like you need to take a rest
Yeah.
day and things like that. But if you're an Apple Watch user, I think using the HRV model too is just a good way of just like taking a data profile of like your actual stress and like looking like what things are causing you stress and then how can you approach that. So did you have anything else to add about like the HRV part of trackers? Because I know they offer several different things, and I know you have some really great studies and research to share with everybody about like steps and some other things that devices provide, but I didn't want to skip over that before we moved on.
No, I think this is super interesting and so overlooked. And I want to reiterate the point of, because I hear this sometimes, if you feel like you're doing everything right and you cannot see the progress that you're trying to see, really dive into, if you do wear a watch or you wear some sort of fitness tracker, check this out and start keeping track of your average scores, and then implement some of these things to see, make that a goal, make it a goal to improve your HRV scores, and just see how that
Mhm.
affects you being able to move forward. And then I had one thing that I was just going to shout out during my whole time when we were in this recovery phase. I had a couple
Yeah.
of really good supplements that I just have to shout out because they really did help. I know we did Adrenal Restore from First
Mhm.
Form, and that was just helping me with, repairing and been restoring my adrenal health, which is directly related to stress and being able to lose weight and things like that. And then also,
Yeah.
I started taking GDAs, which is glucose disposal agents, which helps you. You can probably talk more about technically what they do, but basically it helped me funnel carbs to use them as fuel. And I know my body was I was getting really bloated, holding on to water, not being able to
Mhm.
lose weight, even though I was, technically in a calorie deficit. I was not in a calorie surplus. So I knew I wasn't gaining body fat, but my body was just bloated and inflamed and holding on to all this water. So starting to take those and really watching my carbs, funneling them around my workout, taking the GDAs, helping to make good use of my carbs. Those two supplements I think were really, really helpful for me during that time. But just being aware of stress and now starting to track this, I think is just another tool to put in your belt of fat loss, which
Yeah.
I think also is like with watches, any kind of fitness trackers, I think that's what we need to look at them as tools. And basically, I'm going to put some articles, some research articles that you guys can check out in the description here. But basically, what I found when I was doing some research on comparing different brands like Whoop, like the Aura Ring, like the Apple Watch, like Fitbit, like Garmin, is that most of them are not very accurate at things like tracking energy expenditure. So if you are looking at
Mhm.
your watch just to see how many calories you burn, those numbers are not going to be accurate. They were found to be a little more accurate on tracking steps and some of them on tracking sleep. Now I know like the Apple Watch that I have as well, I don't wear it when I sleep because I have to charge it, but things,
Yep.
like your Aura Ring or your Whoop, those scores were found to be more accurate. And then your heart rate, tracking your heart rate. And so that is something that I'll keep an eye on too when I'm working out or when I have certain cardio heart rate zones that I need to stay in. But what they were found is that most of them were accurate within themselves. So if you are tracking, like, let's say you're tracking your HRV score or you're tracking your calories in a workout, if you're wearing the same device and then you track your average, over a month or whatever, you can track trends. So when you have higher calorie burns or lower calorie burns, or when your HRV is higher or lower, that's going to be more accurate. So you can track
Mhm.
those trends. So I think that could be really helpful in just making sense of why your body is doing the things that it's doing, why it's responding the ways that it's responding. Stress is a huge factor. So anything that we can use to track stress is beneficial, I feel like. And then your steps, I've used it to track my steps since I had it. And I really do feel like is close to being accurate. I know sometimes if you're walking, let's say you're walking on a treadmill, if you're one of the people that holds onto the handles, it might not be so accurate because you're not moving.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I wanted to share. I have the stretchy kind. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can probably see. So I used to have the plastic or the metal where I switched to this and Chris Nicole and Brittany and I think Brittany was the one that originally like told us both about these. But basically if you are a hands-on cardio person, if you put it around your ankle, so if you use the stretchy one, you can put it around your ankle and it'll still track. Or like the thing that annoys me so much is if I'm like at the grocery store and I'm pushing a grocery cart, um, I've like sometimes I used to like move my one arm while I'm like pushing the other one because it wouldn't track any of my steps if you're holding on to something. So putting it around your ankle, you kind of look like a convict, like you have a house arrest bracelet. But if people get over that, then you can put it around your ankle. And I find that on leg days, it's best to do that because I was noticing my trends. Like you said, it's all about just kind of looking at your trends, right? And so I was noticing on upper body days, I was getting way more steps. Well, it's because I was using my arms and my steps were getting tracked is the movement. But like if you're sitting in a leg press or like sitting in a hamstring curl, it's not getting any movement unless it's
right,
around your ankle.
right.
So just something to think about. Just thought I'd throw that out there.
That's one thing that I'm actually like, it's almost the opposite. Like when I'm on the treadmill getting steps in, it helps me not hold on because I like to not hold on
Yeah.
or go through
Yeah.
stairs or something like that. But what annoys me would be to think about, like, let's say I do arm day and I'm just doing a bunch of flies and it's getting recorded as steps when I'm not actually getting steps, you know?
Yeah. 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 Well, and if you like doing multitasking or holding your phone at all, or like
Yeah.
answering some sort of message or looking at your emails or something, if you're trying to multitask, if you have a lot of cardio,
Yeah.
it makes it convenient so that you can do both. But I digress. So,
Okay, so
you
one
know,
thing I did want to talk about though is
yeah.
the calorie burn, because I do feel like that is one of the biggest things people love to track. And I don't think, as if you're using it for motivation to push yourself harder in a workout, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. What is, it gets a little bit dangerous if your goal is to, I mean, actually, if your goal is to lose weight or gain weight, no matter if you have a physique goal, is to take those calories as actual food calories. So if you're using your watch to track, okay, this workout, I did this HIIT workout, it told me I burned 600 calories, that means I can add those 600 calories in to my fitness pal. So first of all, those numbers are not going to be accurate. They're not going to, it does not mean you burned 600 calories worth of food. It is just tracking things like your heart rate, your recovery, things like that, your movement, and you know, the time you spend is a huge factor. If I am, this is actually really interesting to me. If I am in a workout where I'm like a little bit tired and I'm sort of being lazy in between sets and I'm kind of on my phone, and a workout that should take me 45 minutes takes me an hour and a half because of that, it'll show, my watch will show that I burned more calories simply because I ran it for twice as long. So it's tracking that
Mhm.
whole time versus my intensity was probably lower because I was taking a lot of rest, you know? And so it's not going to be accurate with the numbers, but then also those numbers don't match your meal plan numbers. So when you
Yeah.
have figured out your calories or had a coach figure out your calories and your macros, they're factoring in your exercise. So unless
Mhm.
you are an elite performance athlete, so like you're going to the CrossFit games and you're training for them, then I would say you might want to take a look at how many calories you're burning and replace those with fuel, because that's your goal. It's not a physique goal. But you want to
Mhm.
be really careful with watching calories and replacing them with food if your goals are physique related. So whether you're trying to gain lean muscle mass without putting on too much body fat, like our improvement season bikini competitor listeners, or if you're trying to cut weight, that can really put you out of a calorie deficit. It can be really frustrating if you go week after week and you're putting in all this work and you think you're in a calorie deficit when you're really replacing those calories and bringing yourself back up to maintenance or even a surplus. So thoughts on that?
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I think with any of those things, you have to take it with a grain of salt because it used to be before watches that we'd look at the machine and we'd see like, oh, I want to do the elliptical because it burns way more calories than the treadmill does. Whereas those don't really play a part. And so, I know there's some coaches that will have their athletes track their cardio by like the amount of active calories they've burned. I'm a big believer in more so focusing on the intensity of that workout. So using your watch on a cardio perspective to like give you a target heart range to hit. If it's hit, it's going to be like higher on the high intervals. If it's steady state, we want it to be in that fat burning zone. So we're a little bit lower on the heart rate. But I mean, that's how I would use it as a tool. And same with like on your lifts, even you should be kind of paying attention to where your average heart rate is and things like that so that like you said, you're not just like kind of like
Yep.
taking long rest periods and like getting distracted on the phone. So I think if we just look at it as something that, we're not using that as data to like calculate, then we can kind of compare and contrast like, okay, well, I burned 1,000 calories in this tennis class versus like the last week I did like 500. So I was like moving nonstop in that one. So I know I was working harder because I had more calories. Like if you look at it from that perspective as just a comparison, then I think that it makes sense a little bit more. But Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love the comparison, and I love if it motivates you to work harder too. I know
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
Apple Watch, they have
Like I
the,
want to
the
burn more calories.
rings. You can like close your activity rings, and that's like
Hmm.
motivating for people.
Yeah.
Like I just have to close my rings today, and that it's a visual, and it motivates you to get out
Yep.
and move, get your exercise. Mine will ping me to stand if I sit for a long time, and it's the most annoying thing
Uh-huh.
in the world, but I don't turn it off because I actually need it sometimes. Sitting at my desk,
Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah, it's been an hour. I need to get up. I need to walk. I need to move my body. So things like those little reminders can be super
Mhm.
motivating. I think as a whole, watches, fitness trackers, if data is your thing, I think they're super beneficial.
Well,
I
another thing I like about the Apple Watch is they have those reflective minutes, or the breathing
Yeah,
um
take a deep breath.
like intervals where you do it for a minute. I will do that. And it's been known that like doing box breathing or those kind of exercises can literally instantly my HRV will go up by several numbers by just doing that 1 minute a day of breathing. And I just don't make a lot of time for meditation because I have a hard time like sitting still. I can, I can allot a minute
Yeah.
to a mindful minute on my Apple Watch. And then when I'm focusing on my breath for 1 minute, like it really does wonders for getting you into that rest and digest and raising your number, even just 1 minute. So I feel like that's something to be noted as well that makes it a little
Yeah.
bit unique. I don't think the other trackers have the rings per se,
I think
though. I
that's an
think
Apple
Apple's the
Watch
only
thing.
one.
But they could have other goals or something that you said. I had a
Yeah.
question about the breathe thing because that's another
Uh-huh.
thing that my watch will ping me to do. And
Yeah.
I wondered if maybe you know this about the settings. Is that just on a timer where it will just routinely tell you that, or is it connected to like your heart rate or something like that? Where if your heart rate gets kind of low and you need more oxygen, is it?
Yeah. I turned my alert off as the reminder part, but when it used to give me reminders, it would be when my HRV would get low. Like it would say, I think you need months to
Yeah,
breathe. Like when my heart rate would go up and I would be a little bit stressed out, not doing something like an exercise, it would ping me. So I think it's smart enough technology that it understands that. Maybe I'm totally misquoting it and maybe it was just all in my head, but I know when I used to have that reminder, it would give me the reminder when I was like a little bit on the faster heart rate side of things.
that's so interesting.
So,
Do you know that your body too has natural reminders if you're not giving it enough oxygen, it you'll yawn.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
a way of giving your body more oxygen. And a really
Mhm.
interesting thing that I think is probably this exact same, like our body has these sensors. I used to be a performing artist on stage, and I would always get the butterflies before a show. And like it's just part of the process, but it sucks every time. So like the 15 minutes before the show, you're sound checking, you're on stage, you're about to go on. And what I would do is I would always be yawning on stage, and there'd be like sound guys backstage. They would always tease me about it. Like, are you tired? Do you need a nap? You're about to play a show. But what I started to understand was when your heart rate gets high because of anxiety, even though it was excitement, your breathing gets really shallow. And so my
Mhm.
body would like be like, get some oxygen in, and I would start yawning. And so then when I was aware of that, then I would try to like breathe in deeply and give myself oxygen. But if I looked at my score, my HRV was probably low, just because of that, even though that wasn't a bad thing, it was a good thing. But just if you're noticing that you're yawning a lot, you might need to turn on those deep breathing reminders and really get good oxygen into your system.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I've like I said, I've only been an Apple Watch user, so I would feel bad like or misinforming our listeners if I were to say like the pros and cons of every device because I know that there's pros about each one and there's negatives. So when I say negatives for the Apple Watch, because that's the only one I use, so
Yeah.
I feel like I can speak on it. Things that annoy me about the Apple Watch is just I sometimes get a little bit obsessive about closing out the ring and then I get really frustrated if I don't close out the rings or if it's a rest day and I don't hit like my step goal or my exercise ring closing that out. So I've had to learn to set my standards like really low because you can recalibrate your goals for each of those rings. So I set my exercise goal really low, like my movement goal really low. So that way, like, even though I'm doing this things that I'm supposed to be doing on a rest day, like I still don't feel like I'm breaking the rules because that bothers me mentally. I don't
Yeah.
know if you feel the same way or if you know of any negatives that stand out to you.
Yeah.
Um,
If it ties
mhm.
into your self, like if you don't feel like a success, if you
Mhm.
don't hit certain things, I
Yeah.
I'm the same way. It's with the step thing with
Box check.
me. If I am like just like 50 steps under, I will literally walk laps in my apartment before I go to bed. And it's like, just go to bed. Sleep is probably more
Yes.
important at this point than
Yeah.
hitting your 10K step goal.
Mhm.
But those numbers, when you're a perfectionist, it's like you just have to hit them, you have to hit them. And so, yeah, I
Yeah.
love the ranges in the trends. I think that's if you can disassociate from hard numbers, always having to hit them and tying your
Mhm.
self-worth into that. I remember I used to coach at a boot camp where we wore heart rate monitor chest straps. And if someone got there and they forgot theirs, it was always like, well, now this whole workout isn't going to count. And like, I get it. It's not as fun when you can't see your
Right.
step,
Right.
but like, you can't have that mindset. Like, if I forget my
Mhm.
Apple Watch or if it dies, oh, that's a huge thing for me. If I'm
Yeah. I hate
going for a
that.
walk and it dies and doesn't record my steps, it's such
Mhm.
a bummer.
I
But
know. It really is.
yeah, so I do understand that kind of don't get
Yeah.
obsessive over it. Only use it to benefit, by having that data if it motivates you a little bit or, if it
Mhm.
shows you where you might be more stressed and helps you bring down those stress levels. But yeah, I have only ever used Apple either, and I'm super curious what you guys use. Do you use a fitness tracker? What do you use? What do you like about it? Have you learned anything through this podcast? Comment if you're watching on YouTube, comment below or shoot us a message at Balanced Bodybuilding Radio on Instagram. And let us know if you have any questions as well. We will answer them in a future episode. But do you have anything else that you want to say about trackers?
No, I think that's it. Yeah, I think it's smart to the only other thing I'll say is just like buy one of those like chargers so that you can recharge the Apple Watch because that is an annoying thing is just
Yep,
not just the one that you have by your bedside, but have one that can plug into your car or whatever with a
yep.
USB port. Like have two so that you don't get frustrated where your Apple Watch dies and that workout didn't count because it's a big deal.
Apple, you need to get one of those portable batteries.
Yes,
You can charge it
exactly.
all the time.
Hopefully they'll improve. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So, yes, send us a message, send us a DM. If you have any subjects that you want us to tackle, or if you have questions for us having to do with anything general health and fitness related, or if you are a competitor in your improvement season, you have questions for us, make sure to shoot us a message on Instagram or comment if you're watching on YouTube. And if you are looking for a coach, you can go to glamgirlbikini.com and click on the Get Started button. You can fill out an application. We will do a call with you. There's no commitment. It's just finding out if we would be a good fit to help you reach your goals. So, do you have any other things you want to say before we sign out?
No, I think you had mentioned, or I don't think you mentioned, but you had sent out all of the tank tops that and you're modeling one of them right now.
Yes.
So those of you that sent reviews will be getting the tank top that Leemarie, you have them all sent out so far, all of
Yes,
the
they are
reviews
all
that are
signed
there.
up so
Okay.
far.
Yeah. So if you are interested in having one of those bougie tank tops that she's representing here with our merch, you can also leave us a review and just tag us and on your story on Instagram so that we know that it's there and we'll get that to you.
Awesome. Well, until next week, thank you so much for listening.
Bye.